This is everything that was shipped to me for the month of May 2021. It's getting to be a pretty big stack this month. You're not going to be too impressed, Andre. I'm sorry. Kick things off. We'll start with the X-Men. Pretty small stack, but lots of good stuff here. Hellions. Still really like this book. They got into this adventure where Arcade, who makes the, I guess, Arcades of Murder Mayhem, recruited Mastermind, who's an old Brotherhood of Mutants villain, who's a psychic mutant, to build Murder Mayhem arcades in the minds of each of the members of the Hellions, so they would see what they thought was the life they wanted, yada, yada, yada. It was pretty cool arc. This is the last issue, but everyone is starting to realize that Sinister is still cloning, and he's cloning a lot of folks, so Arcade is looking for Sinister to give him some clones. Marauders, they are setting Storm up for some crazy heavy stuff right now. She's definitely going to be a big part, I think, of the next big event or crossover, which is coming up, Hellfire Gala, and definitely part of whatever comes afterwards, because she's in like a bunch of the different X-Men books. So I think this is going to be a bit of her just thinking back on the good old days of the 80s, early 90s X-Men. Probably some more stuff leading to Hellfire Gala in there as well. Children of the Atom. This, I really hope, is like a 5-6 issue series. I'll take it to 6 and then I'll cancel it. I don't think it's going to go past that. I don't see how. 3 issues in and not too much is happening. They're kids who are definitely not mutants, who are posing as mutants. They even met the mutants. Storm went and found them in the last issue. Like, oh, children, you should come to the island. You're welcome anytime. They're like, oh, that's cool. You know, it's all right. And they try to walk through the gates and nothing happens. So we'll see. X-Corp #1. I've been really looking forward to this book. It's the corporate side of all the stuff that's been happening on the island. So, you know, the island of Krakoa makes drugs that cure a bunch of stuff. That's a pharmaceutical. Who sells those pharmaceuticals? And who's in charge of all that business side? It's X-Corp, run by Warren Angel, Warren Worthington III, and Monet St. Croix. Or I think she goes by Penance now. I don't know. But Monet. So this should be a fun book. I'm looking forward to this one. X Factor, I'm going to assume they're back in the Mojoverse since it says Mojoverse on the cover. But they wrapped up their last arc, so they definitely have some unfinished business there, so that should be cool to see, and we'll kind of see where that goes. Way of X, really great first issue. I'm not sure if it definitely hints at Nightcrawler creating or thinking about creating a mutant religion, because he made that comment, and everyone keeps asking, like, is that something you're going to do? You're like the most religious mutant we have, and it's him really questioning if there's a need for it or what it would even be. You get these really cool pages of like what appears to be like text from a mutant religious book. There's a great conversation in the first issue between Magneto and Nightcrawler, where Magneto's like, we're immortals, so why do we even need a religion? Why do we even need a god? It's pretty cool. Wolverine, he's still fighting vampires. This cover looks like it's upside down, but it's not, because those are the vampires, you know, they're hanging, they're like bats, right? That's cool. But yeah, he's still fighting. He's going to start fighting a lot more vampires, which is cool. New Mutants. This book's really picked up. I really like the story arc with the Shadow King right now, because there's this cool angle where all these younger mutants who now have control of their powers, but when they first manifest, they didn't. So that like changed their bodies in some ways. Want to go into the Crucible to die so they can be reborn on Krakoa, and they'll have their human bodies, but also still be able to control their abilities, because their minds are from where they last got copied. So yeah. That's a really cool like slice of life story, and I'm the other books like X Factor and Hellions, they kind of have that, which is really cool. So, and then you recognize that dude. He's back. They thought they killed him, and he's here. And I'm gonna assume that they did not stop the bad guys from creating this robot again, and this is the one they had to stop. This is the key to preventing the future that we saw in like the House of X Power of 10 crossovers. This is the reason why Moira got them to create Krakoa, was to prevent Nimrod. But I'm going to assume they didn't stop that, and Nimrod's on the table now, and Xavier, Magneto, perhaps they have to go talk to Moira. I don't know. I've avoided a lot of the spoilers. There's people talking nonstop about this issue and how this is like ties back to House of X and Power of 10 and everything that Hickman's been leaning towards. There's a lot of cool stuff in here, so I'm really looking forward to that. And yeah, it'll be like the first. I'm gonna read this chunk of books just to get to that first. All right, moving on to the normal stuff. This pile's getting thicker and thicker each month, which I know I can already hear you say how disappointed you are in that, but it's okay. Most of it's just like miniseries and stuff. So new book, Red Room, by Ed Piskor. I really like Ed Piskor. He did a really good book called Hip Hop Family Tree. It's all about like the history of hip hop, which is really nice. So this is like Murder on the Dark Web for Fun and Profit. What I really like is like each issue is a self-contained story, and it's all about this Red Room, which I guess is like a place people can go online and like see murder on the internet. So that should be interesting and a lot of fun. Jonah and the Impossible Monsters. Dude, this book is a lot of fun. It's Chris Samney's just killing it on the art, and I'm really liking more learning about who Jonah is and her sister trying to chase her down in this world of monsters. It's just great. It really gives Chris Samney a chance to really shine, dude. I'm really happy with it. I'm gonna not get this name right again, but Kojakaru the Skinner. So Kojakaru the Skinner is this woman here. She's an ancient witch hunter who's been, I guess, resurrected. She's a ghost, essentially, spoiler, and she's fighting covens of witches in like World War One, which I love. This is like the kind of Mike Mignola stuff I really like the early. It definitely ties in heavily to Hellboy because he was summoned by Nazis, but I love this idea of like occult ongoings during like World War One, World War Two, and a lot of the side stuff that Mignola does ties into that. I guess he could do another book, but then he was like, oh, you're just doing like the early adventures of Hellboy, which he also does as well. But this is the last issue, so but it's really fun. I still don't know what the Outerverse is. I never actually took the time to look that up. Hey Kids Comics by Howard Chaykin, Volume 2. This is a miniseries. I got the first one. I really like it. Howard Chaykin is like he's been working in comics for decades. Like he got his start back in like the 50s as a kid, and he's still making books. So Hey Kids Comics is basically him telling a slightly fictionalized version of the history of the comic book industry from behind the scenes, because he knows all the greats. He's worked with most of them. So he's taking all these stories and slightly changing the names. So you're basically seeing how like DC and Marvel came to be and all the kind of honestly shady dealings they had early on as publishers and how they just mistreated creators and stuff. Because Howard Chaykin's a big, he pushes a lot for creator rights and creator, people getting what they're due and what they're owed. So this is a lot of fun because you get to hear a lot of stories, and there is some controversy though, because people have actually pieced together from the first series, like the people that he's talking about in these books. So they obviously have no comment when confronted, but it's kind of cool. Lady Baltimore, like I was saying, I really like Mike Mignola and like the witchcraft and occult stuff in World Wars. This is basically that, but in World War II. The first Lord Baltimore, all those books were World War I. Lady Baltimore's continued the mantle of the Baltimore family, and she's now hunting the occult in World War II. So it's actually a really fun book. It's lots of just nice pulpy adventure and stuff like that. Beta Ray Bill, dude, this is a book I'm going to pass along to you once we meet up and it's done. It is just fun. It's straight up fun. Beta Ray Bill's on a quest to reform Stormbreaker or get a new Stormbreaker since Thor was a dick and smashed it. The last issue, he went and found Odin because Odin left Asgard and gave the crown to Thor. And Odin's literally, Beta Ray Bill finds Odin in one of the realms at a bar, and he's just living in the bar and he's brewing his own beer in the back. And he tells Beta Ray Bill where he can go and quest to get a weapon that'll be like Stormbreaker that'll allow him to change back into his not his human form because he's not a human, but change from this crazy horse cyborg. Carmen, still really loving this book. The art is just phenomenal. The storytelling, like the sequential art, if you will, is really, really good. I really wish this was a book that would get like nominated for like an Eisner's just to give it more exposure with people, but I don't think it will. It's very European, so I don't think it's everyone's taste because it's a very personal story of a woman coming to terms with just what her life is and how she sees herself versus how others see herself, and being like it's really introspective, and I really, really enjoy it. Again, the art is fantastic, but it's almost too European for people. So from the world of Hellboy, the House of Lost Horizons, a Sarah Jewell mystery. This is written by Chris Robertson, who's a longtime collaborator of Mike Mignola, so it does come from the world of Hellboy, but Mignola's not involved, so I don't know what I'm getting into, but it's from the world of Hellboy, so I'll pick it up. It'd be cool. They'll deal with some occult stuff, which I like, especially in the world of Hellboy. They go deep there. Another issue, Black Hammer Visionaries. This one should be really good. I really enjoyed the last issue. It was all about Abraham Slam. This one clearly is going to be dealing in the weird, I forget what they call this, but it's a weird verse where like Colonel Weird and Lady Dragonfly like hangouts and stuff. So I think this will tie into just like how because we know how all these heroes in Black Hammer came to the farm, but there's still a lot unknown about this weird verse. They kind of explored it in the Colonel Weird mini. Kind of touched upon an earlier issue. This was focused on Lady Dragonfly and her cabin of horrors. So I'm kind of curious how this is going to go. Looking for it. It's all really good book. We only find them when they're dead. Like in this issue is a couple months late, but it's issue 6, so this is the make or break. I really like the writer Al Ewing. I've really been digging the arts. The story has been good, but when my stack is getting this big, I got to start thinking about what do I cut. But I really like this book, so we'll see. But it's issue 6. I give every series 6 issues, so if this one rocks my socks off, it stays. And then Ultra Mega. I can't say enough good things about this book, man. It is so insane. I thought the first issue was crazy. The second issue was even crazier. And they're definitely setting up some really wild stuff. You see like the crazy origin of the Ultra Mega, which was actually at the birth of our universe, and how they've been fighting this kaiju cancer for millions of years. And it was wild. And again, the art is just insane. And another thick issue. Like this guy's I don't understand if he's doing this monthly right now, or if he's like worked up a bunch of work previously, because nobody puts out a book this thick every month on time, and it's all written by one guy. That's insane. Either this guy's a workhorse, which I'm not doubting that he could be, or he's got a lot of stuff ready to go. And then Scumbag. This book has just gotten so good, and it's always been good. I really enjoyed it, but it's just hilarious at this point. He's basically playing all 3 spy agencies, the far left one, the far right one, the one in the middle. He's just playing them all against each other, really for his own games, which is just sex, drugs, and rock and roll. He doesn't really care about anybody, as you can clearly tell. He's flipping through here, giving dudes the bird. But yeah, it's just so good. Like it's Rick Remender just killing on the satire too, of just poking fun of like the way things are in the world, with kind of commenting on things like cancel culture and extremists on both the left and the right, and who's right, who's wrong. It's great, a lot of fun. I got this book. This is a one-shot by Cullen Bunn, Eden. I read this so long ago, I don't even know what it's about. I know it's a horror book. I remember that. I just don't know really what it's about. But I really like the writer. He's written a lot of stuff I enjoy. He's written my all-time favorite Western comic of all time called The Sixth Gun. Highly recommend to anybody. But yeah, this is good. I think, though, side note, I think this is the first book I've ever purchased from Aftershock. I've never really bought any of their comics before. I'd have to double-check that. But I think this is the first book I've had from Aftershock, so... But should be fine. Again, he's a good horror writer, and I've liked his previous horror stuff, so I'm glad this is the one shot. It won't tell a story. It's nice and thick, so it'll be good. It's oversized, though, and I like oversized books, but I don't have, like, a box that fits them, so they just sit weird. It's a small thing. Yeah, it's first world problems. And then the new issue of The Last Ronin, and I assume we're going to find out what happened to Casey Jones when we see what happened to the other turtles as well. What I realized about this book, I was thinking about this today, is like this book is like a full circle for like Eastman and Lair's fandom of comics, because the original TMT is clearly an homage to Frank Miller's Daredevil. Like there's so much overlap between like the hand and the foot, ninjas, alleyways, tall buildings, New York, which is fine. They're both great run. Frank Miller's awesome in his own right. Love the original run of the Turtles, but this is like an homage to kind of like Batman The Dark Knight Returns, which is a Frank Miller book. Definitely I get a lot of Ronin vibes, which is a samurai book from Frank Miller as well. So it's just kind of funny to see these guys come full circle with their fandom. And it's still a really good book. Like I absolutely love it. It's no complaints at all. So yeah, those are all my singles. We're on to, I got a lot of graphic novels this month too. First up, Zot, the complete Zot collection from Scott McCloud from 1987 to 91. Scott McCloud wrote this book, Understanding Comics and Making Comics. Understanding Comics, honestly, I read that when I was younger, and it completely changed how I read comics. It just really opened the door to me seeing comic books as like sequential art, and just all the tricks and techniques that artists use in telling a story in a comic format. So he made this before he wrote that book. This is like some of his first work. And it's basically the story Zot. He's from like another kind of world, and he's come to our world, and he had looking for this item, and he goes back, and this sister and her brother kind of get taken over with him. That's as much as I know. I'm sure it gets a lot crazier than that, but yeah, for a guy who basically has a book that everyone says, like, if you like comic books, read Understanding Comics. You just get a better understanding of comic books. So I'm very curious to read this, which he did before that. because obviously a lot of the techniques he talks about, like he's a big history comic guy, so I'm sure there's a lot of cool stuff in here for that. I picked up this as well, Norse Mythology, Volume 1. Neil Gaiman, so he's retelling all the Norse mythology stories using a bunch of great artists like Mike Nola, Jerry Ordway, David Rubin's in there, I love those guys, and PK Bressel does a lot of the art as well. They've been collaborators for a long time, so this was really cool. Volume 2's out right now, so I'll get Volume 2 originally as well. Xenozoic, well, I think it's Xenozoic Tales, about a Xenozoic complete collection. I can already hear you saying, what is this, Mr. Toy? Well, when I was younger, there was this cartoon called Cadillacs and Dinosaurs about these people that lived in like a post-apocalyptic world. It was full of jungles and dinosaurs, and they drove Cadillac cars, and it was really cool. And I always was like, man, I could never see all the episodes, and I never really knew much. It just kind of came and went in my childhood, but it really stuck with me. And then years later, I found out it was Marvel printed a Cadillacs and Dinosaurs comic book. I was like, oh, so that's where it's from. It's actually not even that. It's a series originally called Xenozoic Tales by Mark Schultz, and he reprinted some of the issues with Marvel in color. So this is all the originals, the entire run in black and white. And you're not really seeing any Cadillacs, or really, well, there's some kind of some dinosaurs, giant dinosaur creatures. There's some Cadillacs. But yeah, this is really cool. Mark Schultz is like a legend. I've learned since learning about Cadillacs and dinosaurs, but he just is like really great. He's like an artist's artist. He's the kind of artist that, like, you know, guys who are making books nowadays be like, man, Mark Schultz, if it wasn't for Xenozoic Tales, I never would have gotten to drawing comics, because he's just crazy. And I love seeing stuff like this in black and white, because you really get to see like the art shine, and you really get to see just like all the detail and like some of this stuff. It's hard to see there. Picked up this Ether, the complete collection by Matt Kidd and David Rubin, who I just called out in the Norse Mythology. I really like David Rubin. He's collaborated with Paul Pope. You can definitely see some Paul Pope vibes in this cover for sure. He also did some of the Battling Boy stuff and spin-offs. And I really like Matt Kidd as a writer. He writes a lot of cool stuff. This is basically a story of a guy who finds like the ether. It's like a world between worlds type of thing, and kind of goes on an adventure there. So this has got the entire series. Very much looking forward to it. Hey, it's got quotes from Gabriel Ball and Fabio Moon, so you know it's good. I love those guys. I also picked up this Death and Glory. It's a prestige edition, but it's Rick Remender, who I really love, and Bengal. He's a European artist, and I really dug this series. This is woman. Her dad needs an organ transplant, so to raise money, she's a driver and a mechanic. So she becomes a driver for like a gang, and she realizes that there's some shady stuff. Obviously, they're bad guys, so she tries to rob from them, and then goes on the lam, and just, you know, all the stuff that goes on there. But I picked up the first 6 issues, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna stop getting this and just wait for a big edition, because it was really good, and I like the oversized version. And last but not least, Barry Windsor Smith's Monsters. This dude is a book that is like, it started as like an urban legend in a sense. Barry Windsor Smith is a really, like, again, he's an artist. He is most famous for doing the original Weapon X story that explained Wolverine's origin. And the story goes that he proposed this as a Hulk story, like a backup or like a what if. And Marvel was like, oh no, man, it's a little too dark, because it deals with a guy who becomes a monster. There's some shots in here, but it also deals with like, some child abuse, because that was something that happened to Bruce Banner around when Barry Windsor was working at Marvel. But it was just too dark. So he didn't do the story with Marvel, and he's just been working on this book for, I guess, like 20 odd years is the story. And yeah, it's considered like his magnum opus, they say. It just got released, so I'm really looking forward to it. Barry Windsor Smith is like crazy detail artist. I'm trying to find like just look at this page here, man. Just so much detail. And again, I love seeing like black and white, because these guys, they don't do things digitally. So this is like pen and ink on paper. So it's like, you mess up, you are going to see it. So just lots of really good techniques that you don't necessarily need to do when you're doing things digitally, because you have a lot more options. So, just some of like things like cross hatching on these clothes, and like the ink on the floor here, like just, it goes back to like, when I mentioned Scott McCloud and like understanding comics, like all these little tricks they use to like just tell their story. Like, oh man, like this is in the rain. Like, look at this. This is so good. yeah, that's everything. I'm pretty sure you got your opinions, and I'm pretty sure you're gonna tell me to cut some of the books, but that's okay, buddy. I'm always looking forward to your cheers and your jeers, and let me know what you think.